my name's Chanel Riley. I'm an editor at Variety, and welcome to this 92nd Street Why Talk event with Modern Love. The Amazon Prime series has returned for a second season, bringing us new episodes based on the weekly column in the New York Times. Joining me today are showrunner, executive producer, writer-director John Carney.
Hi.
New York Times Modern Love column editor and co-producer Dan Jones.
Hi.
Executive producer Trish Hofmann. And the stars of episode 8, Tobias Menzies.
Hey.
And Sophie Okonedo.
Hello.
Hi, thank you all so much for being here. Congratulations on another wonderful season. Whenever I have people as accomplished as you all are, I actually like to go back to the beginning and ask, what was your first job in your industry? The first time you felt you could call yourself an actor or call yourself a writer or producer? And let's start with Trish, because she looks like she already knows.
No, I was thinking of like crazy jobs that you had before you ever got into this business. But my first job was working on a movie called My New Gun, which was a Diane Lane movie. I had moved over. I was in the fashion business. I was a buyer at Saks Fifth Avenue, go figure, living in New York. And woke up one morning and said, I'm going to regret it if I don't try the film and television thing. And I wanted to learn how to produce from the bottom up. So I said, I'll go work for free, but give me a whole movie. And I went down to Tribeca Productions and got a job on My New Gun, a little Stacey Cracker movie. So way back in the 90s.
What kind of job?
Well, I started off as basically an intern doing whatever it needed. And then by the end of it, I ended up becoming a assistant production coordinator, and then started producing short films for Columbia, and just started kind of working my way up that way. So I really boots on the ground, trying to figure out what it takes to produce a show.
That is so cool. John, what about for you?
I still don't feel like a for real director or producer or writer. So I was going to say that I tried to bring, I guess, some of the spirit of myself and my mate's first movie that we made on a camcorder with borrowed money, that kind of spirit to everything, as some of the execs in Amazon will tell you. Is this guy actually show running the show? And try and bring some of that sort of feeling of kind of, I don't know what the right word is, but kind of slightly flying by the seat, making it up as a little bit as we go along. And I don't think that'll ever quite change. I keep on saying, like, each time, if Amazon came along or if Disney came along, I'd maybe grow up. But Trish will testify to the fact that hasn't quite happened yet. And certainly my father is like, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, I'm a writer and director. And said, no, but seriously, you couldn't be a writer or a director. But apparently I am. My first job was, I left high school, and I joined a band.
Really?
Yeah, which was kind of a real running away with the circus sort of experience. I told my mother at the foot of her bed at the end of fifth year, which is our second last year, I'm not going back to school. And I told her about this band that I had met during the summer, in between the penultimate and last year of school. During that summer, I kind of played with a band, and then it was like, you either go back to school now and put your school uniform back on and give this up, or you stay with the band. And I stayed with it. So music was my first sort of love. And the first check I ever got, I think, was probably as a musician. And then I sort of segued into sort of doing kind of musically based things, or films with short films with lots of music, and then I kind of ended up here.
Amazing. Dan, what about for you?
My first job as an editor was working for a place called Stage Bill, which doesn't exist anymore. Now it was taken over by Playbill a few years after I had left, but it was at the time, the program sort of guide for Lincoln Center and Carnegie Hall. And I was an assistant editor. I was earning almost nothing. I was 30 years old. I was way too old to be doing that. All my colleagues were like 22. The office was underneath the reflecting pool in front of the Mitzi Newhouse Theater. And I would take the subway from the Upper West Side and eat in the Metropolitan Opera cafeteria. And I could live my entire day in the winter without ever seeing sunlight. So it was a very much of a sort of mole existence. And the job wasn't even really an editor job. It was more of a cutting and paste. It was actually like physically taking the pieces of a program and taping them onto cardboard and then having those prepared to send to the printer. And I did that for about a year. And the best part about the job was during slow seasons, we truly didn't have very much to do during certain shifts of off season. And we would go into the office and have chess tournaments that would last for days. And the stakes were really high. And sometimes the vice president of the company would walk in and we'd all just be, it was like a real live chess tournament. We'd all be around a table and everybody sort of huddled around as the competitors were going at it, and we were getting paid for it. Not very much. But.
Did you ever win? Were you a good chess player?
There was one guy who dominated, and my only real accomplishment was beating him once.
Nice. Yeah. Once. Sophie, what about for you? What was your first job as an actor?
I joined a youth theatre that was that's not around anymore. It was at the Royal Court Theatre in London, and they put some of us in a kind of professional show, which at the time was a play called Serious Money, written by Carol Churchill, and it was an incredible experience. I mean, I had like a couple of lines in the first act, a couple of lines in the second act. But the cast at that time, and they were, Gary Oldman was in it, and Leslie Manville. I mean, Gary Oldman was like 26 at the time, or something, and Leslie Manville and Alfred Molina, Linda Bassett. I mean, it was such an incredible cast. And I just used to ask if I could just sit in on the rehearsal. I mean, I wasn't needed for many rehearsals. Ian Jury did the music, and it was an absolutely amazing sort of start. I got paid, I don't remember, $50 a week or something. I just thought I was absolutely loaded. And for the first time in my life, I went to restaurants because I thought I had loads of money. There used to be this restaurant on the King's Road called the Stock Pot, where you could buy a meal for about, pounds, and I thought, and I was going there like every day thinking I'm really rich. So yeah, that was so it was in the youth theatre, put us in a professional show, and I learnt an enormous amount about acting from, or each of the actors had such a different way of kind of getting to the place they needed to be on the stage. And Gary was very kind of sort of stayed in the character and very kind of stayed in it for the whole show, backstage as well. And then Alfred Molina would tell these wonderful kind of jokes at the side of the stage, these anecdotes, and then just turn and go and then become the character on stage, and then come back and finish off the anecdote after you'd just done a scene on stage. And each of them brilliant, but just had completely different ways of approaching. So that was a great lesson.
Tobias, for you?
My first job was out of drama school, and there's a long-running hospital drama in the UK called Casualty, and my first job was a semi-regular part in Casualty, and it was this sort of troubled son of one of the doctors, and he had a heroin problem, and and one of the oddities about back then is that there was no screen training really at drama school, so it was heavily theatre based, and so I was just thrown into this TV show, and it was kind of an amazing opportunity just to sort of learn on the job. But don't go back and watch any of it. It's
well,
I'm Googling it now.
Yeah, that is certainly not the way I'm spending my evening.
Come on, there's no need for that. Come on.
As long as the internet holds out, that's 100% what I'm doing.
Well, again, congratulations on a wonderful season of Modern Love. I guess I should start with Dan. I know you've been editing the Modern Love column at the New York Times for some time now. You're a consulting producer on the series. When did you first start thinking it could be an anthology, or was it that someone approached you?
I mean, this stuff was percolating for a while. I've been editing the column for 17 years. And there's one every week. So there's 52 a year. And I guess I don't know, 800 or so at this point. And I think the column got value in having this huge archive that was amassing of personal stories. And I guess it was Todd Hoffman, who at the time was working at ICM and was representing Times intellectual property in Hollywood. And he'd handled modern love essays for different things. But I think, unless someone's going to correct me here, it was his sort of brainchild to create an anthology show using modern love. And it took a while. I know that Amazon was interested, and it was in development for years, I think. But it didn't. And then once it finally moved forward, it moved forward really fast and was really exciting. And it's been the joy of my professional life, honestly, this project. And so someone was asking me, because everyone's been so grim during the past 18 months or so, what has been my happiest moment? And we weren't talking about, this show, or what didn't have anything to do with this, and just completely out of context, like, what's your happiest moment of this whole pandemic stretch? And I said, honestly, it's sitting on my couch by myself with my laptop and headphones on, watching the first edited cuts of this show and just sort of bawling with gratitude and happiness and sadness and just all the stuff that it churns up in me. And this episode did it the most.
Oh, yeah, episode 8. Yeah, very good cry, as we say.
Yeah.
John, you created the series and you've written and directed some of my favorite episodes. What attracted you to this project overall?
Well, so, I mean, you're right, Dan. Todd Hoffman rang me sort of out of the blue, and sort of, I think was like, is there anything that you'd like to do? And then he mentioned Modern Love. And as it happens, it was a column that I had read just filming in New York a few years beforehand. And I sort of like to tell the story. When you're filming, you all will know that you can't read anything substantial in the weeks that you're filming a film, because you're so absorbed with your work and stuff. And then you get a Saturday off if you're on rolling weekends, and you get like this one day off, which you basically spend kind of lying around in bed reading the notes for tomorrow or whatever. It really is an 8 or 9 week thing which you get into. And the Modern Love column was the only thing that I could read. So I buy the New York Times on Saturday for, is it like $5 or something? It's expensive.
Yeah, it might even be $7 now.
It was $7, but like all I would read, I'd be like, this is ridiculous. I'm spending $7 to read something that takes me 3 minutes to read with a cup of coffee in the morning. And then I'm like, impeachment? What, this? No, I can't be reading proper New York, like world stuff. So I had amassed, while making this film with Mark Ruffalo and Keira Knightley, these little database in my head of these very pleasant 10-minute coffees I'd had filming, where I got to escape the movie. And so when he said, do you know the column? I was like, actually, incidentally, I do. I have like 40 of my favorite stories from that column. And I think I just started telling him the ones that I remembered that I loved and that sort of, that jumped out at me. And then he sort of said, well, look, go off and see how you would pitch it and think about how you would kind of present it back to Amazon. And then I, like all of the projects that I've ever gotten on spec when somebody has called me up, I completely thought, well, I'll pitch and then they'll go away. And I kind of want them to go away. The only other person that I can read about in real life is like Larry David, who apparently never wants to do any of the work, but he keeps getting the work. That's exact. I'm an Irish Larry. I'm like there's a Gershwin film that we're doing soon, and that was the same. Somebody rang me, do you want to do a Gershwin film? I'm like, okay. And then I pitched this, totally assuming, and like there's a time traveling device in it. And it was like, okay, when do you want to start? I'm like, no, I was trying not to get this gig. And with Modern Love, it was a bit the same. It was like, well, it's a daunting task, and I don't want to wreck what Dan and the writers have done over the years, which is amassed this very, it's a prestige column in the greatest newspaper of all time. It's high class, it's sophisticated, it's urbane New Yorkers that I love. It's the whole, and I'll screw it up now. I'll come in and wreck it. And so I kind of wanted it to go away a bit. And so I pitched back to him what my kind of ideas were for what that might be. And really, when you say creator, it's I haven't created much in my life. It's not like this is my brainchild. What I did, I think, was sort of try to just simply imagine the TV series from a filmmaker point of view, as opposed to a TV point of view. That was my one sort of bottom line, which is like, how can I make you 8 mini movies that don't feel like they're a TV show, really, that feel more like, let's get guest directors in, and, Sharon Horgan wrote an episode who is like the ultimate person who like wants to be a filmmaker. Like 5 minutes on the phone to her was like, this TV thing is like, I want to be like, make Nora Ephron movies and cool modern films. She's into cinema, and she's into camera work and DPs and all that. She kind of thinks like a filmmaker. And I started to put this image together of like filmmakers coming together, adapting these shows. And the main idea was like, let's not connect them. Let's do what the column does, which is that you can dip in and out. You don't have to watch all of them. You can binge them, but you have to have, it's the idea that you'll make 8 episodes that everybody loves, or indeed everybody hates, is sort of like, well, I'm going to make 3 that I can that hopefully this person will like, and then you don't have to watch the other 5, and then the other people will watch those. It's a bit like a chocolate box. And that was the initial sort of pitch for me, was like, and also, the other thing that I think about that I think is in the column is the idea, and Sophie, you and I talked a little bit about this, making the shows, like, how do you make something that might not just be entertainment, but that might be kind of useful? To me, and certainly Tobias and Sophie, I think a little bit coming from this side of the pond, TV for us was kind of useful. Like there was a sort of like the BBC almost had a sort of an educational remit. And likewise in Ireland, there was sort of like, well, you can watch a play on the television, like an hour-long play. And you can learn something. It's not just like schlocky reality or soap opera or casualty. There's stuff that can be useful to you, and not just like, not in the documentary department, but you can have drama that is more like theater and so I grew up on that, and we forget nowadays that entertainment, like dramatic, entertaining television, can be healing, can be connecting, can be, I think, like, what's the record for like MASH? The final episode of MASH was like 3 people in America didn't watch that episode. It's like, it was a connecting tonic for human beings.
Yeah.
And TV has become so sort of trashy, and and the lines between reality TV and drama are so blurred now that we presume TV is sort of like just a content, feed me, entertain me, but we forget that there's a nourishing part of that diet. And I felt like with Modern Love, you could, I mean, it sounds a bit pretentious and a bit wanky, but maybe we could make 3 in the episode that had a quality of like, and here was the pitch to me was like, if there's a girl who can call up her guy friend and say, the breakup that you're going through right now, watch episode 6 of series 5 of Modern Love. Go watch it now, bye. And that person can go and watch that and not just like have a cry, but actually feel like, because it came from a real person in the column, that's the distinct, it didn't come from a writer's room where people are faking it. I fake it when I'm rewriting it. But the original source was a human heart or 2 hearts beating, and that truth will kind of extend into the show. And that was my pitch. And fucking, they greenlit
it. Darn it, they greenlit it.
Here we are.
Trish, what about for you? How did you come to be involved? And were you familiar with the column?
Before I moved to LA, I was a New Yorker. So I would read. As a matter of fact, when I moved to LA, I kept the Sunday Times coming every Sunday. So I love that column, cup of coffee in the morning on the deck out here. So I was very familiar with it. I came on not too long after John and Todd and John had got together, and I was in a place. I just produced a movie called Dumplin'. And so I really had kind of shifted prior to doing that movie of really wanting to sort of be in a place where I could, be helpful in putting good things out in the world. And when I had heard from Amazon that they had the show Modern Love and John Carney, and I was a fan of John Carney's, all of his films, I immediately said, okay, sign me up. I'm ready. So please, whatever I can do. So, and I had some experience shooting in New York, and we shot season 1 in New York and started meeting John over emails and voicemails and Zooms, and just fell in love with his point of view. And he's very modest when he says that he doesn't, I always call it the Carney secret sauce that kind of floats over all the episodes, despite the fact that we have multiple directors. But there is that, and just, I think he was so eloquent about it, but it kind of seeps through all of them. And I would also say the music does too. And he brings his, background in music to all the other episodes. So I love the show. I'm so proud to be a part of it. I think especially coming this year in the pandemic, like just putting out good things is really what we need, and authentic stories. And so I couldn't be prouder to be a part of it.
Now, season 2, episode 8, A Second Embrace with Hearts and Eyes Open, stars Tobias and Sophie as a divorced couple who reignite their romance. This is actually a favorite subgenre of mine. People who have fallen out of love or gotten divorced to fall back into love. I am a sucker for stories like this. For each of you, how familiar were you with the show, and what interested you in playing these characters or just, being a part of the series?
Should I go first?
Sure.
Yeah. I didn't know the show, but was approached about it, went and checked it out. And John describes it really well as a real, I thought watching, there was a real tenderness about it, a kind of a sweetness about the episodes, which I thought was really kind of affecting. I really liked and then had a look at the actually listened to the podcast which is like a reading of the article, and I really liked the quality of that too. Again, the sort of non-fiction element of it, these real lives, and it has a gorgeous quality of this sort of, as John described, a kind of urbane New York kind of coolness about it. Then had a chat with John. Really liked, talking with him and how he spoke about it, and also was reassured that he was kind of open to some conversations about scripts, which is something I often just need to be able to do, to be able to scratch around with the material a bit. So all those things kind of came together, and it felt like an easy choice to jump on board. Sophie was not on board by that point. So, but obviously, if she had been, I would have not gone anywhere near a big no-no. Yeah.
Too intimidating, or she's too difficult to work with?
Second both.
Too good. It's way too good. Yeah, exactly.
Sophie, what about for you? Were you familiar at all with the show or the column?
No, I wasn't. And but I'm just, I don't know. I live in a bubble out here. I don't know what's going on half the time. So, but I wasn't. But I actually didn't. I just went on the script, really. I just read the script, and I did know that Tobias was already attached, and so that was actually, I was very happy about that. And I just sort of went on the story, really, and the part. I just thought, oh, I wasn't expecting what happened to happen, like halfway through. I just wasn't, or however long way through it is. I just wasn't expecting that. And I thought, oh my goodness, how will I do that? How's that going to work? That's a clanger. I don't know how to move on from that. So all those questions made me think, this is something I should be doing, because I really like that kind of challenge of, like, I don't really know how this is going to work. I don't know if it's possible. It might all go kind of, so that was it. And then I did know John, I had watched John's film, so I knew that I was going to be with a really great director. So that was, that made it kind of super relaxing for that, for that side of things. But I didn't, and I didn't watch them before I started either, because I don't know, I was just thinking, I don't really want to know the world that I'm entering. I just want to know the world of this person. I didn't want to see from the outside how it looks, the show, in a way. It was just didn't think it was easier to watch them afterwards, you know what I mean? So I didn't want to know. And also I thought, I might not like it. And then I signed up to it. You just don't know. I just think it's better not to get involved. Do you know what I mean? Just kind of go on the character, the script. That's just the way I tend to pick things like that. Just a gut feeling, really.
This episode really hinges on your chemistry, and you really feel like two people who have known each other a long time and have that lived-in relationship. Did you know each other before shooting?
No, we were I tell you what, we were really lucky, because we got, we had to quarantine because it was during the pandemic, we had to quarantine in a very nice hotel in Dublin. And I was quarantining with Tobias, and we were in our little bubble. So we had, I think, a week or 10 days where we couldn't really see anybody else. And the two of us spent over a week together. And we just got to do that thing. We were definitely doing some Zooms with John and stuff, but we got to do that thing where you just dig quite deep, sort of stuff that you do when you do a play, where you just really dig quite deep into who the characters, how they've met. We had lots of conversations and sitting on the sofa and kind of, going back in time of how they met. And so I think we had this brilliant thing happen where we just created a world for ourselves, because often you don't really get to meet the person you're playing opposite till, in the makeup chair on the day, but we by the time we came to film, and we still are really good friends.
Anecdote. Oh, I was going to say, anecdotally, I was at the Marion with them, and it was pretty much with COVID, we were the only people in this gorgeous hotel, and because John could come over because he was testing in, but I can tell you that what Sophie just said is true. Is like I'd paddle down, and basically we'd all like come down in our pajamas, basically, to the bar, and we'd go by to get, like, there were 4 things on the menu we could order, and that was it, because that's all they had. But thank God they had Sancerre. As they know, you'd come down to the bar and you'd see Sophie and Tobias in the corner chatting and talking, and it was fun to witness firsthand. So I can tell you that I saw that happen. It was great.
Yeah, I mean, one of the definitely was like a weird kind of plus of the kind of weird of the COVID situation that we were in, that we had this kind of slightly golden week, which you just never get really, where we could get to know each other. And as you say, I think it was an important ingredient in the episode, because we're telling a story about, the backstory is a whole marriage. And so we kind of had to arrive with a sense of history and sort of knowing each other. And luckily Sophie and I work in a similar kind of way, so we were able just to sort of scratch around for a week, and it's nice to hear that kind of felt like there was a bit of history there.
We all kind of had quite a similar way of working, in a way, with John and Kieran, and we just all we knew sometimes some jobs you get there and it happened, and that was just one of those things. We all sort of think on our feet, change things at the last moment, try different new things out. We're all very kind of do things on the hoof, and with lots of kind of preparation, but we try things out. And so we all worked in that way, and that just made it really, for me, just magical on set. I just loved it.
Is that true, John, or were you cursing us?
No, I think it's exactly true, actually. And working with you both was actually kind of refreshing for me, because I I struggle as a whatever filmmaker and now making TV with trying to keep it interesting and to try and that's not that I'm spoiled or bored. It's that so much of filmmaking and now TV making is controlled and scheduled and organized. And as you say, it's unlikely that two busy actors could have something as amazing as a week together just to hang out before doing a half an hour of TV. That is totally luxurious. But in another way, it's exactly how my first films came about, was with people that knew each other, actors that had worked. So nowadays, everything is so choreographed and worked out. It's the way you work, particularly Sophie, I think is like, is to try and find some unknown thing and to try and not know what's happening next by knowing a lot and having done your homework. You now go in blind. It's what every musician is trying to do. It's 20 years of going, and then going into an auditorium and trying to forget and play it like it's the first time, and there's a certain amount of sleight of hand and magic with that, and a certain amount of, having to fake that in a way because you do know it, that leads, I think, to the great movies that we like and the way great movies work. Many great movies were made in a sort of particularly in the 70s, and I think we all love movies from the 70s, there was an unplanned sort of thing happening in Hollywood in movies in the 70s, which was the old studios were fading, the young kids were coming in, and there was a lovely clash of those two identities. And you had the structure and the money of the studio, but you had the wild rock and roll or punkiness or whatever you want to call it of younger directors and movie actors coming up who kind of watched Truffaut and Bergman and Fellini and liked those movies, but wanted to make this new American cinema. And it's lovely to make a TV show where you don't quite know what you have. And I think your instinct was 100% right to not watch the other episodes of Modern Love, because then it's competition. And then you're comparing yourself to these other, as opposed to just making your movie. And that's all we've got as actors or filmmakers, is like, well, that's my shot. Like, I gave you that. Some of my personality is in that. It isn't just a room of people. It isn't a committee or whatever those cliches are. It is a bit of me. And it's hard to put that into TV nowadays.
You mentioned shooting during the pandemic, which was, one of the many challenges of the last year. You also decided to go outside of New York. The entire first season was set in New York City. Here, you're all over the world. Curious if the creatives can talk about the decision to go international and sort of what are the challenges of not just shooting during the pandemic, but shooting love stories.
Well, it's a controversial thing, that question, a little bit, because the show is going to air tomorrow in real time, and we'll find out if people are like, oh, why isn't it in New York anymore? And what's it? My idea for me, and then everybody else can speak because I'm the showrunner, I get to speak first. Was like, if we do a second season in New York, then every season has to be in New York, and it becomes slightly limited to that very nice world of New York. But if on the second season we put our feet outside, even for 2 or 3 episodes, which is what we did, then we can kind of represent the show to the world a little bit and say, this can actually go down anywhere. It could be in an airplane coming into Dubai. You could set a whole episode. You could set an episode in, as long as it's a big city, that's Modern Love. It's not limited to any of the subtleties of any particular city, because cities are different, and the cultures within city, all of these subtle nuances are enormous once you start to film in a place. And I just didn't want it to become stuck in any one city. So but we'll see if people might go, because TV by definition is like TV is set in that time and in that place. You can't have the odd couple, or Cheers or be somewhere else. You have a Christmas special that goes somewhere else, but generally the return to the same location, the same style, and the same jokes is a key. In this, I feel like it's our strength that we don't have to stick to any of those things. And I look at them as opposed to, they're not limitations in this show. They're the thing that sets this show free. And we should double down on that. And we should say it early, which is season 2, which is like, let's set an episode in Dublin. Dublin's a cool commercial place now. It's funky and all of that. It doesn't really matter if Kit Harington and Lucy Boynton meet in a train. It doesn't really matter what city it's in. And likewise, the episode set in London, but we'll see tomorrow.
I mean, also there were practicalities of trying to shoot during a pandemic. And so the second season was already going to have international episodes, or at least one.
Yeah.
But that didn't end up happening in the same way because we couldn't, we couldn't do it that way. And I was just really impressed by how, first of all, it seemed like at any moment this whole thing was going to shut down and the plug was going to be pulled and it wasn't, there was going to be an outbreak and all of that. Trying to remember how fraught this process was and how many protocols there were and scares and all of that. It's a total miracle that it was pulled off. But I was talking to Andrew Rannells. I interviewed him. We're doing a series of interviews in the Times for this weekend to sort of dig a little deeper about the show. And I was thinking as those protocols and those restrictions were I worried about those with a show that's supposed to be emotional and about human connection and all of that. And so, I asked him what, setting that aside, that there could be problems with that or things that were prevented. Were there advantages that you saw from the pandemic restrictions? And John, it's exactly the same thing you talked about, where he said, well, we all had to go up. A lot of this was filmed in Schenectady, in the Armory in Schenectady, and in Troy, New York, and upstate New York. And he said we all had to go up there in quarantine. Some of the actors in his episode were his friends from Broadway days, who'd all sort of cut their teeth in summer stock theater. And he said it was like being in summer stock theater. We were all up there together for a long time, hanging out, every meal together, bad food, all just sort of cloistered in the poor working actor way that they'd all cut their teeth. And he said that was worth a lot. That was just worth Amazing. A lot in terms of emotional.
So interesting.
Emotional benefit that overcame whatever anxiety there was or stress about the protocols. And I even think the protocols were bonding because, as Trish will attest, there was sort of a kids getting scolded in school quality to,
I was so scared of our COVID officer.
To getting in trouble about the protocols and all of that even that was
we're not 6 feet apart, it's
20 minutes in a room or whatever it was. There was, yeah.
I would say the shooting in COVID was a huge challenge. We had our 8 episodes going into season 2. We were 4 days out from shooting them in New York. We did have an episode that was going to take place in Bosnia. We then got shut down it was in March, shut down, left us a set in a stage in New York for 7 months. And what we would do, John and our Amazon execs and our fellow EPs, we would still meet every twice a week and start talking about how we could get the season back up running as soon as possible. So we were figuring out, we had a crew on that worked together to try to figure out what would be great protocols to have in terms of sanitation and how to work in this environment, which I think some of it has become the underpinning for the industry standard now of how to deal with it, which was amazing. And then creatively, we had many conversations. We talked about, are there COVID episodes? Do we want to do a show? Do we want to do any episodes about COVID? Which was a difficult thing for us. We were all like, do you think that's too depressing? Is it COVID fatigue? And then we found a couple things that happened. One is a couple episodes we couldn't shoot them during COVID for various reasons. So we needed to go back and see what other episodes that we sort of had in wait that we needed maybe a little bit further development. So we ended up doing that. Yeah. So, I mean, it was, but getting back to sort of figuring out the COVID of it all, at that time, Tiny Love Stories when we were developing season 2, Tiny Love Stories wasn't out. And then Tiny Love Stories became available. And we were like back and forth, like, do we do something about COVID?
This is a different feature in the Times, part of Modern Love, where it's 100-word love stories. So we gave ourselves homework, which we did each week, which is like, go back and look at essays, go back and look at scripts, go back and look at Tiny Love Stories. And we came back with the train one, which was basically, 100 words. And John got inspired by it and was like, all right, let me try to pitch something. And probably again, regretted pitching something so good.
I genuinely did not want to make that episode, or I didn't.
100%. And I can tell you that is true. And
I tried to get other writer and directors to do it. Yeah. And then I was reading William Trevor short stories, and William Trevor would say, like, I'd go and sit in a bench and overhear people. When I was blocked as a writer, I'd go and sit in a bench and I'd overhear people. And when I got a sentence off a couple that I overhear, I would go back up to my apartment and start writing, because that sentence was enough. And it wasn't too much. So the Tiny Love Stories is like, as a writer, and I don't know, as actors, if you feel this, but it's like, all you need is that push sometimes. And then you can do your job. Like, I can't think of the idea, but if somebody would give me the idea, it's almost like a game of charades. It's like somebody gives you the movie title, then you can go and perform it or something like that. But I'm really interested in what you guys are saying about the idea of, like, the one good thing that came from this is the fact that you were thrown in together, particularly on a script about a couple who had a past, and how invaluable that is. But like, it always struck me, like, when I would read like Sidney Lumet books about how he made films, that they rehearsed for like 3 weeks, those movies. But you can see it in the movies. And actually, I think it's a thing that's really missing in TV and movies. Now that you mention it, I actually think that this pretending that we, are a troupe of actors. No, you've got to be a troupe of actors. Like the Andrew Reynolds story is fascinating. Like, I almost feel like, you can't work it into people's careers, obviously, that you have, two, but like hanging out and rehearsing and being locked down, like it's amazing, because you're right, like everybody, this episode, I think more than anything, will stand out for the weird chemistry that you guys brought. That's like, are they actually kind of like together, or
did it sort of spoil you? Would you like to work this way in the future if possible?
I would love to, yeah.
I certainly try to get it in where other directors and actors are open to it. I mean, and then I try to work with the same people again if that's been a good experience. I mean, I think me and Tobias have been talking, trying to do something else because we had such a good time. We're trying to find something else. So it's definitely the way to go, and it's also about a type of rehearsal, because in a sense, sort of just trying to act out the script really isn't that useful in rehearsals. It's really just sort of answering questions. And, I mean, I have been to I've had a few jobs filming where they had rehearsals, but some of those rehearsals weren't so good, almost better to have none, because they were sort of saying, now pretend there's a big arch there and walk over to that point. And you're like, this is a complete waste of time. You get there and you're doing the whole thing in a tiny kind of box. Do you know what I mean? So it's just, it's the kind of character-based stuff is and asking questions, really.
Yeah.
Lots and lots.
I feel like it happens at a sort of like alchemical level, but it's sort of, if you have a bit of time as actors, your sort of nervous systems can kind of get to know each other a bit. And so, and it's sort of slightly unconscious, non-rational stuff that can go on if you're on the same wavelength. And that stuff, I think, is very, very hard to fake.
Yeah.
I love it.
There's a kind of an atmospheric thing.
Again, it's like musicians playing together that know each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, and feeding off, like, and it's the difference between a good show and a like, that wasn't great. Like, it was early on in the tour, or, you know, like the whole stand-up comedy thing of like, you it's not just rehearsal. It's actually, Tobias, exactly right. As you say, it's like a weird unknown thing. That's like the pulse is like the way you guys sit in the couch in that scene where you reminisce about, like I've read that scene. I must have read that scene. Kieran, my brother, wrote that scene a year and a half ago, the first draft of that script, and sent it to me. And I've been reading that scene in redrafts and imagining it in a load of different ways. I know it's personal to Kieran. I've put my own interpretive spin on it. But when you actually did it, it was so not what I would have thought or directed. Like how close you're sitting is just, now that I watch the dailies of the rushes of that scene, I'm like, why are they? And when you first did, I was like, they shouldn't be sitting this close together. Like, but then you watch it back and then you're like, of course they should be sitting. They're like brother and sister. They're more like brother and sister in a way than man and wife, because they broke up and now they've become super comfortable with each other and they've got these kids to bring up. It's a very, very unique situation when you get people that actually get on and like each other.
I was thinking about that.
Yeah,
I was thinking about that exact scene where you're recalling a past and a past life together, and sort of stresses and embarrassments, but there's also a flirtation going on. But the chemistry in that scene, it seems like they've known each other for decades. Like it was really so powerful.
And the danger and the risk of when they do actually start to think about that.
Yeah, like what are we doing here?
But it's also like, without saying any lines of dialogue, it's great when you cross cut between those two scenes, and the way you guys played it was really careful. And it was like, you could have played it in a more romantic comedy way of like, oh, let's have a shag, or, you know, but actually you played it in a film way. I mean, not to make those distinctions too crudely, but like you played it in a proper grown-up way, which is like, hang on a second, there's kids, there's minefields, there's stones, there's water. If we walk from here to the bedroom, we've got to walk on children's toys to get there, pets, animals, mortgages, you know, psychotherapy, Lexapro, the past, the history, before we actually get into the romantic comedy upstairs in the bedroom. And it's all played without a line of dialogue or a music cue, or, you know, it's all played on really what you're talking about in the Marion, which is hanging out and drinking and talking and ripping it out. But probably you weren't talking about this script too much when you were hanging out in the Marion. You know what I mean? You probably only talked about it when you weren't talking about sharing ideas or other things. Or
that's right. It wasn't just wall-to-wall script. That's absolutely right. So there's lots of
It's so fun to be able though just to go to the set and see what happens. Like you said, you just don't know what could happen if you are kind of immediately told, do this, do that, and stand this. Then there's never that moment when everyone just sees what happens, you know. And that's, I think, as I get older, that's how I really like to work. And, you know, my ambitions are different, you know, now. I just think, well, I just want to have that joyful experience where it's very free and you see what happens, because the alternative gets a bit boring.
Well, it's a fantastic episode. It's a great season. I want to remind everyone that all episodes of season 2 are now available on Amazon Prime. Congratulations. Thank you all so much for being here today.
Pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
So good to see you guys. I know.
Yeah.
See you.
everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, everyone.